Most animated shows that have been running for multiple decades have slowly made their visual style look more up to date to keep up with all of the other shows out there. For example, The Simpsons started out looking like this, and now it looks a lot cleaner and they've opted for a more rounded art style instead of the sharp lines of the original. And something like Scooby-Doo has been completely overhauled so many times that it's honestly hard to count. But South Park, for the most part, has stayed the same. Yeah, they updated their formats from 4:3 to full screen, and they've used some 3D models recently to have better looking scenery, but other than that, it is just the same four boys standing at the same bus stop 3 decades later. But it hasn't always looked like this. I'm going to take you through some of the weirdest changes to this iconic show over the years, and at the end of this video, I'm going to reanimate a part of the show using the weirdest character designs for the boys. I'm going to be making the first two characters in a moment, but first we need to go back to the beginning, 1997. Actually, no, we're going to go even further back than that, to before the show even had a name. Jesus vs. Frosty is the unofficial first episode of the show, and we can already see the start of a few iconic South Park tropes and of course the art style that we've all come to love. Also, interestingly, the character that most closely resembles Cartman is actually called Kenny in this. I don't know why, but they decided to change it later on. The short 4-minute episode sees the boys fight an evil snowman and then find Jesus to try and help them. Jesus kills the snowman with his halo, and that's pretty much it. Whilst it isn't officially a South Park episode, most fans view this short as our unofficial introduction to the characters. Speaking of which, they do look kind of crazy. To be fair, Kenny is almost identical, but the colours for Cartman and Stan are all messed up, and Kyle is straight up a different character altogether. This short was made using stop motion and actual paper characters that were cut out in order to make the animation. I tried my best to recreate both Stan and Kyle in this style, picking out a colour palette for each of them that matched the original monstrosities as closely as possible. I could use these hard plastic templates to trace the shapes of the character sections and then cut out the coloured paper. Just like the original, I'm going to just be drawing the details on with a pen, and surprisingly they look pretty close. I still think it's crazy just how different Kyle looks in particular, but it is equally surprising just how close they managed to get Stan in their very first go. That's 2 characters down, 2 to go. But I feel like it would be a shame to not quickly look at some of the other weird characters they've had over the years. The original design for Randy Marsh is completely terrifying. His design was only really changed after he became a more prominent character in the show, which seems to be a theme because if we go back to season 1 episode 2, we can see an early version of the character we now know as Tolkien. Apart from one clear difference, he's white.
Hey look, I'm Tolkien, but I'm white. I wonder if Cartman will like me now. Anyway, I'm here to tell you that you should subscribe to the MPT channel because there is a lot of cool things coming out in the next few weeks.
Stylistic changes like the background characters slowly getting more detail over the years are really the only other notable case of South Park changing character designs. Well, excluding one-off episodes like Good Times with Weapons where they all became anime characters. But in the year 2000, we would be introduced to a whole new beast. This video is going to take a bit of a turn for the design of our next character, because in the year 2000, Eminem decided to release his own web cartoon called The Slim Shady Show. Now I'm not gonna lie, I am a very big Eminem fan, and particularly around the early 2000s, everything he touched in the music industry was quickly considered an instant classic. But unfortunately, his magic touch didn't really carry over to him making his own show. This animated series is shit. Like, straight up garbage. And believe me, I forced myself to watch all of it. Its only redeeming factor is that Eminem has a pretty good vocal performance in it, which you would hope considering his job. So why am I talking about this show? It just so happens that Eminem is a massive South Park fan. He even has a whole song where he pretends to be Mr. Mackey and teaches a class at South Park Elementary. His love for the show carried over to this series, as in one episode there is an unofficial crossover between the two universes.
How can you talk with my balls in your mouth?
Slim Shady gives the boys ecstasy pills and laxatives, and then the rest of the episode is kind of just them perving over Wendy, which is actually really creepy because Eminem is about 28 years old and Wendy is the grand age of 10.
Ah, there she is, Wendy Testicle Burger. Look at those long legs, those curves.
But all of that is irrelevant, because we're just here to steal their equally stolen designs. Wow, what kind of person would profit off stealing South Park character designs and using them in their own show? That's really... anyway, I brought a reference image of the show into an animation software called Krita, where I can slowly trace over the original and get all of the right details. Each of the different body parts are on separate layers so that when I come to animating them, I can actually move the character in the way I want. Since I'm now going to have to animate the final episode on the computer because there is no physical version of Cartman, I'll need to get Kyle and Stan in a digital format as well. I took some pictures of them with my camera, and now I can cut out all of the individual parts and drop all of my current characters into Blender. We're still missing Kenny though, so in order to get a design for him, let me tell you one last wacky story. This South Park ripoff is probably the worst of the whole lot. It is an Arabic version of the show made in the country of Kuwait. Because it's in a language I can't speak, I have no idea what the quality of the writing is actually like, but just by looking at the rest of the show, I don't hold out much hope for the comedy. Luckily, Some Legend gave all of the episodes English subtitles so I can finally understand this show. It kinda defeats the purpose of watching Block 13, because by this point you may as well just be watching South Park, but you know, maybe it has some funny jokes at least. Spoiler alert, it didn't. For some reason, most of the comedy seems to revolve around Cartman beating up his sister, and I don't really know how to feel about that. The reviews for the show aren't very positive, with the few that I read all giving it a 1 out of 10 rating. This guy even said, quote, "This show is not a show and I think I'm traumatized. But if one thing is for sure, this show has some interesting character designs. The boys are obviously all in Arabic clothes of some description. My favourite of these designs has got to be Kenny, using the standard headwear as his hood to completely cover his face. Other characters like the replacement for Mr. Garrison are surprisingly original, and the bus driver luckily doesn't bear any resemblances to Mrs. Crabtree, because fucking hell, I don't want to ever see that woman again. There's also this female teacher whose name is Miss Atayat, who was quite similar to Mrs. Chokesondick, despite her making her debut in South Park only a few months prior to the release of Block 13. To recreate Kenny, I used the same process that I did for Cartman and simply traced each section. Drawing all of the little red details on the hood gave my hand a massive cramp, but I will happily go to any lengths to make trashy South Park parodies. And just like that, I have a full cast of South Park characters with differing art styles and designs. It only feels right to put them into the iconic bus stop, so I just need to quickly make the set. I put the camera into orthographic perspective, which basically just makes everything flat and gets rid of perspective shift entirely, and makes the final image look a lot closer to the show. The characters are all just textures applied to planes, which makes it really hard to select each individual character because there is a lot of overlapping geometry. To solve this, I put the characters into separate groups so that if I wanted to move a whole character, I could just select the section and then drag them around. I wrote a script that plays into the idea of them all having different looks to normal, which ends with perhaps the most iconic South Park trope of all time. I got some quick AI voices from 11 Labs, and then I could animate. For once, I actually took the time to line up the movement perfectly with what they were actually saying, and then I rendered the 756 frames for the project. The last thing to do was animate some mouths for the characters. Before I show you it, I just want to tell you that I've got some really cool South Park related videos coming out in the next few weeks, so make sure you subscribe to not miss it. Alright, here we go.
Dude, Kenny, you look even poorer than usual. Like usually you look like you eat Pop-Tarts for dinner every day, but dude, that's not cool.
Yeah, come on, Cartman. You can't say much.
What is that meant to mean, Kyle?
All I'm saying is that you look like a gym teacher from a body positivity video telling people to work out while sitting on a chair and eating chips.
At least my hat is the same as normal. Yours is a completely different shape. And Stan looks like an English private school girl from the 1900s. God damn it, Cartman.